situations that you might find yourself in. How would you react if someone started speaking Japanese to you and you couldn't respond and they just were not taking English for an answer? Is that something that would be a fun challenge to you, or is that something that would completely overwhelm you? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this video. Thank you for joining me on my channel. My name is Alex and I'm a South African living in Japan right now. So this video is going to be a few tips and pieces of advice that I feel like would have been helpful for me when I was applying for the JET program. If you have any questions after this video, please feel free to email me or leave them below in the comments and I'll get back to them as soon as possible. But yeah, let's get right into it. This is going to be a longer video, so I recommend you getting something cold or warm to drink while you watch this, depending on your climate. I don't know if you can hear, but my kettle is on the stove, so my tea is going to be ready in a few seconds. Just a quick disclaimer before I go any further, because I know the internet likes discourse. This is purely based on my experience. This is also not to say that your experience is going to be exactly like this, and this is not to deter anyone from coming on the JET program. Yeah, this is my advice, these are my tips, and I hope that you find it helpful. Alrighty, so like I said, my name's Alex, I'm from South Africa, and now I've been living in Japan for about a year and a half. Is it that much? A year and a few months. And previously, last year, I was on the JET program and I was placed all the way up in Hokkaido. Now I live closer to central Japan, like in the middle, around there. Before I got into the JET program, I did some volunteering at a kindergarten, I did some online teaching, and I also did some high school tutoring. So that was helpful to me coming into the JET program. But if you are somebody who has zero teaching experience, don't worry, you will learn a lot on the job. And as part of JET, you are not the main teacher, you're the assistant language teacher, so you'll never be alone in the classroom with the students, and you are assisting the teacher, but you'll always be assisted as well, or at least that's the way it's supposed to be. And if it's not, speak to someone immediately. Alrighty, so my tea is ready. It's not rooibos tea. I'm sad to say I forgot to bring rooibos tea with me this time when I came from South Africa. I know, bad South African, and I actually really miss rooibos tea and 5 roses. But anyway, I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you are interested in coming onto the JET program, taking part, or maybe just learning a little bit more about the program. So let's just get into the basics for a few seconds. So the JET program stands for the Japan Teaching, nope, I always get it wrong, the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. And essentially, everything is in the name. So the main goals of this program is to get native English speakers into classrooms and to expose those native English speakers to Japanese culture, language, society, etc., etc. And you really get what you're sold with the JET program. Like, they take you all the way to Japan, they put you in a school, and you have your experience. There's few strings attached to that. And the reason I'm making this video is just to add to some of the helpful resources that are out there. I found that there was a lack of South African applicants making these kinds of videos, so I hope this can be helpful for anyone who's trying to apply from SA. Also, please excuse the background. I'm sitting in my kitchen. This is the best lighting I can get at this time of day, so this is what we're working with. Okay, so your first helpful resource for the JET program is going to be the Japanese Embassy's website. The link is here. And I will also put it in the description box down below. On the home page, if I'm not mistaken, they'll have the list of documents that you need to apply. So just double check all of the procedures that they put out for you and please follow them to a T. Also try and be as early and punctual to submit any documents as you can, especially with your health certificate and your police clearance certificate. Try getting started on those as soon as possible because they do take the most time. And Japan is a very punctual country. They don't like waiting for things. I always talk about how the trains and the buses are always on time, but they don't wait for anyone. So if your documents are not in place, you will not go with your group that is supposed to go to Japan. The main advice for the statement of purpose is to try and touch on the reasons you are interested in Japan and what you would like to gain from your experience on the JADE program. So I can't remember the word count. I'm actually horrible at giving advice because I can't remember anything specific from the application process. But I remember from my statement of purpose, I explained when I first became interested in Japanese culture, in Japan as a whole, in general. I explained why I want to visit Japan and what I hope to gain from the JADE program. So I gave them a good idea of what I would be doing on the program, why I'm an asset, and also how I would bring back skills that I learned here back to my home country. So I think that's a little bit of a guide if you are struggling with your statement of purpose. And don't talk too much. Try and keep it as short as possible and just stick to the facts. Just stick to the things that are true to you. Like, why do you want to do JADE? What do you hope to get out of it? And how are you going to use the skills that you learn on JADE when you return to your home country? Try to keep it like simple, sweet, and short. To the point, not too much. Too good. Okay. Alright, so that's your first and main resource. Also, try and stay in contact with the JADE program coordinators who send you emails. If you have any questions, send that to them. Try not to ask questions that are answered on the frequently asked questions section on the website, because you may not receive a response if the answer is already on the website. A little trap that a lot of people fall into. And then in terms of other resources, I think YouTube and Reddit can be your best friend, but they can also be your best enemy. In my case, best enemy, worst enemy. In my case, I ended up researching too much, and I unconsciously based my experience, like my expectations of the experience, on other people's experiences. So I saw a lot of YouTube videos and I read a lot of Reddit posts where they had this amazing experience and it was incredible and life-changing, and I was like, oh my god, it's gonna be the same for me. That's the worst mistake you can make. Yes, it might be the same for you, but leave room for the possibility that it won't be, and don't have your earth shattered when it isn't your exact experience. But with that being said, please do use the resources that are available to you. I think that Reddit is a little bit more helpful than YouTube, just because YouTube is a lot more curated. You know, it's more cut and edited. I say that as a YouTuber, and I'm going to edit this video as well. Whereas I feel like Reddit is more unfiltered. So try and keep an open mind, try and keep a balanced mind when you are taking in other people's experiences. But at the end of the day, try to go in with no expectations, which is impossible. We're human beings, we're always going to have expectations for things, but try and keep it as low as possible going into the program. And then one term that is very popular on Reddit and in the JET program circles in general is ESID, which is every situation is different. And I used to read it on Reddit before I came on the program, and I was like, can't be that different. It is. It is. You could be in the exact same like school setup as somebody else, as another ALT, but your teachers' teaching styles are completely different. Your school's application of the JADE program is completely different. Your students are obviously completely different. So anything you hear from other people, including myself, just keep in mind that your situation is going to be different. So then just briefly, my JET situation. I was placed in the north of Japan, which is Hokkaido, a very snowy and cold prefecture with delicious food. I will definitely give them that. And Hokkaido is one of the less developed prefectures in Japan in terms of infrastructure. So there's a lot of agriculture, there's a lot of farming, there's a lot of fishery taking place. So you have a lot of wide empty spaces, which are in winter, but that can also add to feelings of isolation. I was an ALT at 2 different public high schools. My situation was a little bit different ESID, because most ALTs will have a office, like they will go to the Board of Education office, and from there they're dispatched to their schools. However, in my case, but I was kind of directly hired to the school. So I lived in school housing. I went to the school every day. And even on days when I had no classes or one class, I stayed in the staff room the entire time. Whereas people who go to the BOE office, they go to schools for their classes and they go back to the BOE office when they're done. All right, and like I said, it was very rural, so I was very far from all the cities. I think my closest city was 4 hours away by bus, and we didn't have any trains that far up in Hokkaido, which was a shock to me because I thought there were trains everywhere in Japan. Now, I use the word typical very loosely because, again, say it with me now, every situation is different. Different schools, depending on the size of the school, will have different events throughout the year. But I think the constant ones, regardless of the size of your school, will be the school festival, which is once a year, sports festival, which is also once a year, and graduation and closing ceremonies. And then also in Japanese schools, there's a teacher shuffle that happens every year around April, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, April, because after spring vacation, the new teachers begin. So this can be a sad or a happy occasion, depending on your relationship with the current teachers. Mine was a little bit bittersweet, but it is always good, I think, to infuse new faces, fresh blood into the school. So ultimately, it's usually good, and the kids are usually excited for new teachers to show up as well. And then depending on your school and how involved they want the ALT to be, you could be invited to go to things like the school trips. So most Japanese schools take a trip to Kyoto, Nara, and Osaka every year. And you could be really lucky and be an ALT that accompanies them on that trip. Sometimes they do school trips around the prefecture, especially if you're in Hokkaido, because there's so much to see. And many of the students who graduate from Hokkaido high schools go to work in Hokkaido, like factories or fisheries or agriculture places, farms. Why am I struggling with English today? But because of that, they expose the kids to a lot of how these processes work from a young age. But you could be lucky and go to a cow farm and get free milk or something. Or you could even get vegetables, which I think is always a win because fruits and vegetables are ridiculously priced in Japan, and I will never shut up about it. On the website, there are also given job duties where they explain what your role is as the ALT. In your work contract that you will get, they also explain to you what you're going to do as an ALT. Those are a guideline, and it depends on the school that you are with. Every situation is different. How they're going to implement using the ALT. So my two schools were actually polar opposites of each other. So the one school was quite unwilling to make use of me in the classroom, and the other school was like, as soon as I get to school, they were like, this is what we're going to do. You're going to do a presentation on this. You're going to take the kids. We're going to go to the field. We're going to go to the gym. We're going to do this activity. And we need you to speak English the whole time. So I had a very up and down work week during my time on the JET program. And I attribute that to just different management styles. And also there is quite a big age difference between my two schools. The schools with the older members of staff would stick more to a very textbook-based curriculum, and the schools with the younger teachers would allow me to veer a little bit off the tracks. Their main focus, one of the teachers told me towards the end of my program, was that the students reacted well to me, like they wanted to speak English with me, so they capitalized on that, and that's why they wanted me to do most of the activities and get the most like language production out of the kids. So you might be someone who's skilled at teaching specific grammar points, at teaching pronunciation, reading, phonics, whatever, and the school will maybe see that strength in you and then put you to use in that way. So with your research on the JET program, you will hear a lot of people saying that they feel like a tape recorder, or They feel like they're not doing anything within this position. And this is very valid. I felt that way in my main school. I felt like I was just going to school, I was reading from a textbook every day, and that was that. And the only advice I can give in those circumstances is that you speak to your JTE and your BOE as soon as possible. I made the mistake of leaving it for too long because I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to shake the tables too soon. But that ended up making me very jaded towards the position towards the end of my first year. And that actually added to the reason why I left the program. So I would recommend as soon as you get to the school, try and have a meeting with your JTEs and ask them what are their expectations of you, what are their requirements for this position, and see how you can fill that. Also, make them aware of what you're good at. If you're a good teacher, tell them what your strengths are. If you've never taught before, tell them what you're open to learning, or that you're just open to learning anything. Just make sure, try your best to establish a clear line of communication from the beginning, and just be persistent with that. Try and stay true to yourself. If you know this is how you work, then stick to that, and just keep in mind that there is a cultural difference. So try and make concessions where necessary, but I honestly think you should stick to your guns, especially when it comes to teaching and your job. You are also a valuable asset as the ALT, and at the end of the day, you are hired to teach these kids, to help enrich their learning process in terms of learning English, and that can be done in a productive way. So try your best. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the TEFL certificate. There's a little bit of a back and forth about this where people are like, no, you don't need it. Yes, you do need it. And personally, I think it's an aid. I think it's a benefit. So I would say if you're in the position to get the TEFL before you come on the JET program, definitely do so. It helps you with learning about classroom management, about how to set up lesson plans, how a typical class flow goes, especially if you don't have teaching experience. This is a very helpful piece of paper. It's a very helpful course for you to do. If, however, you maybe don't have the financial means, or there's just no time before you leave for your new adventure in Japan, then that's okay. There is a course that helps you with teaching English as a foreign language, as an ALT, how you can create activities, how you can learn more about your students, and how you can be an engaging teacher within the classroom. And the next thing is linked to that, because it's also like additional studying, is learning Japanese. So the JET program is very clear about the fact that you don't need Japanese when you come to Japan with the JET program. This is very true. You will survive with zero Japanese. But again, my personal opinion, you clicked on this video to hear my opinion. My opinion is that you should learn at least the basics, introductions, how to say you like and don't like things, maybe emergency phrases like help me, please help me find this, where is this, blah, 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 located. And also what was really helpful for me was learning hiragana and katakana, the two writing systems of Japanese, before coming to Japan. Not only are the teachers very impressed with you, but it also helps your progress along, and it shows other people that you have an interest in the language and the culture, and they're more likely to meet you halfway in that case. I don't think you need to be fluent in Japanese. And if you do come here with zero Japanese skills for whatever reason, you will be fine. You're coming to teach English. There will be support systems for you in place. Just again, my personal experience, it can make those first few months that can be a bit rocky in terms of adjusting. It's a new culture, it's a new time zone, it's a new language. Having a little bit of that language in your back pocket can be infinitely helpful to just getting you settled in those first few months. So I highly recommend getting Duolingo and just building up a streak before coming to Japan. This is like a pre-step advice. Start early in terms of thinking if you really want to do the JET program. So I honestly would recommend thinking about it for a full year before committing to it. I'm not someone who promotes overthinking. I think sometimes you should just go for things and just do it. But as someone who's been on the program, I highly recommend give it at least 6 months. Like if you're watching this video now and you've never heard of the JET program, you've seen some of my videos and you're like, I want that. That's great. And you can have it. Just give it a little more thought. And there are many reasons why I say that, but the main reason is that you are making a massive move, moving from your home country to a completely new country. And Japan, I think, is very unique in that it's one of the countries that are still very homogenous in people, in language, in culture. So it will be a culture shock, but giving yourself that mental space to think of situations that you might find yourself in. How would you react if someone started speaking Japanese to you and you couldn't respond and they just were not taking English for an answer? Is that something that would be a fun challenge to you, or is that something that would completely overwhelm you? If you are placed somewhere very rural and you have specific dietary restrictions, are you willing to go the extra mile to get those food items from maybe a faraway city, having to stock up on food and then bring it back every month, every few months? Like, these are all very practical things to think about. So in terms of being an ALT, you are often the only person that looks like you in your town or in your city. So that comes with a lot of staring and a lot of attention. So really consider if that's something that you will be able to deal with for a whole year. Again, I will speak more on my experience in a next video, but this is just some like food for thought to think about if you are considering the program. And just briefly related to that as well, I think it's very important when you're on the JET program, and more importantly when you are applying for the program, is that you focus on your why. Focus on the reason why you're coming to Japan. So that could be to learn Japanese in a native speaking environment, which was part of my reason. That could be that you have an interest in one aspect of pop culture in Japan: anime, manga, music, movies, video games. Struggling to get to that last one. Fashion. Could be fashion interest as well. Could be food. You really want to try Japanese food. It literally could be any reason. Mine was a combination of wanting to learn Japanese in a native environment, wanting to experience a culture that was so different from mine, and one that was so well preserved. But my word of caution here is just to kind of link my previous 2 points. Focus on your why and then think about it for at least 6 months. And really think about it in the sense that, let's say this is the job, this hand is your job, and this hand is the reason you're coming to Japan. Ideally, you want those two things to mesh together. So you want your job to allow you to fulfill the why as to why you came to Japan. I'm really struggling with English right now. So the truth about your job is that you are working 5 times a week. You're working with the same people 5 times a week, and you're probably doing the same or similar type of work 5 times a week. Your interests, if it's something for argument's sake like pop culture, you want to be here because you want to experience like pop culture in the land that it originated from, or you want to see a specific group, that's fine. But do keep in mind that that's not going to be the majority of the time. You're going to be in this environment most of the time. So think to yourself if that's something you're able to do for a year consistently. If you're able to work 5 times a week, maybe on the weekends you can fulfill this need. Most likely only holidays, depending on your placement. So much to weigh up, but in the same breath, it's not impossible. Right, and then one practical piece of advice before we get to the last point. Once you're accepted and you're getting ready to get to the JET program, to get to Japan, make an introduction presentation as soon as possible. So this is going to be information about yourself, your hometown, your home province, your home country. If you have any pets, put that in there, your favorite things, and maybe even things that you like about Japan and that you can ask students questions about. How deep you go into that is completely up to you. I find that students are generally very interested in you as the foreigner, as the ALT, so there's really no right or wrong in terms of your introduction. And something I actually forgot to do, but I really wanted to with my students, was bring them South African money, because I actually made a whole lesson about comparing yens to rands and how it's physically different, and how the currency, the exchange rate is different to the different countries. So it was very interesting, and students were really involved in that. So try and think about daily things that might not be as interesting to you about your country, about your hometown. You'd be surprised how many students actually want to hear about that, and how helpful it could be in terms of like bridging that gap when you first get there, especially. Okay, and then the final point here is just a few tips on when you get started on the JADE program once you first arrive. These are straight from my regrets bin. These are things that I should have done much earlier and that I should have done more of, but hindsight. What is the saying? Hindsight is 2020. Either way, the past is in the past. So I lived in a very rural placement. There were not a lot of English speakers, so I felt very isolated most of the time, and I should have learned more Japanese in that case. I think it would have made my experience a little bit better, but I did get burned out of studying Japanese at one point. More on that in the next video. But if you are capable, if your mind is sharp, if you have the time at work, I highly recommend learning Japanese. It can only benefit you in this program. Number 2, once you know where you are going to be placed, do as much research as you can about your town, your village, your city, and see if you can find things that align with your hobbies, like even before you reach Japan. If you're an outdoorsy person, try and find hiking spots, and as soon as you get here, ask people to show you those hiking spots. Ask them if it's safe to hike. I love hiking, but my prefecture is famous for bears, so guess who didn't hike once? And no, I didn't see any bears. I saw a lot of deer, I saw a lot of foxes, but unfortunately no bears. So I speak about this in one of my previous videos, which I will also link maybe somewhere on the screen or in the description box. I'm still new to YouTube, I don't know how all these things work. But I spoke about having a third place outside of your home, which is your first place, your job, which is your second place, and then a hobby place, which can be your third place. So again, if you're an outdoors person, try and find similar hobbies in the placement that you're going to. If you're an indoors person, try and find hobbies that you can do in your house, preferably outside of your house, because you're gonna want that variation just for a work-life balance. But the point is, try and find a way to do your hobbies when you're in Japan. And then the last point, which I regret the most, is that I didn't reach out enough to the ALTs around me. Again, just because of location as well. I was honestly far from so much and it took so much effort to go places. And by the time I met the other ALTs, I think it was winter and it was very difficult to travel. And then when winter was finished in March, because it's Hokkaido, I had already decided to leave. So I met some really cool people, and my advice there would be to ask around about line groups, about Facebook groups, even ask your school to get in touch with the other schools and send you the ALT details if that's something they're able to do, if there aren't any privacy concerns around that. Point is, just try and connect with as many foreigners as you can, because living in Japan can be an isolating experience. I think Japan is amazing for holiday. It's such a great escape from your everyday world, and it's like this fantasy, magical, whimsical place that you're coming to for vacation, but it's completely different if you live and work here. So it really helps to have a space where you can maybe communicate in a way where you can speak a language that you're more comfortable expressing yourself in. I think that makes a big difference. And then just having somebody outside of work, outside of your work circle, to call a friend as well. So try and get connected as soon as possible. If you are in the Inaka, which was my case, there won't be a lot of Facebook groups available, and that's why I mentioned the tip of asking your school to link you up with the ALTs from surrounding areas. So there's always resources available, there's always places to reach out to, so please do that. And with that, I think I'm finished. I think I covered everything. my tea is finished and the tea is spilled. Not really, but I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was helpful. Even if you just take one thing away from this and that's the thing that gets you to Japan, I will be so happy. I hope I didn't crush anybody's Japan dreams. That's not the point of this video. I really just want people to come to Japan with a little bit more of a balanced outlook as to what it is to be on the JADE program. I think it's an amazing experience. It's definitely a roller coaster. It's a once in a lifetime experience. And if you have the chance to experience it, go for it. So thank you again for watching. Have a great rest of your day or rest of your evening, wherever you're watching this from. And if you want to see some more of this content, here are some recommended videos. Okay, thank you so much and goodbye. I have been speaking. Whew.